Welcome to Nasdaq TradeTalks, where we meet with the top thought leaders and strategists in emerging technologies, digital assets, regulatory landscape, and capital markets. This segment is presented by Charles Schwab. I'm your host, Jill Malandrino, and joining me on the desk at the Nasdaq market site, we have Gaurav Saran. He's founder and CEO of ReverseLogix, Monica Gorman, managing director at Crowell Global Advisors, and Marco Ayala, fellow and board member of International Society of Automation, known as ISA. And he also serves as a chair of threat intelligence and cybersecurity for the AMSC Gulf of Mexico America Cybersecurity Committee. We are here to discuss why proactive cybersecurity measures are essential to mitigating risk, ensuring trust and integrity in automated systems while safeguarding critical infrastructure. It's great to have all of you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks. Certainly a lot to unpack when we think about automation, Marco, but at the end of the day, it still does come back to the organization of the culture, the people,
Absolutely.
The training.
Absolutely. So some key fundamentals, especially with the stuff that we do in operations and control, is that safety is usually paramount, right? That's the number one thing. With these systems, we've digitized heavily for the last 30 years, especially even more so the last 20. Moving stuff that was traditionally disconnected or not connected into the realm of fully highly coupled systems and homogeneous at the same point. And so key pieces there is that we see a lot of different departments across this that have reach into the systems, and without some type of governance and a solid culture, you don't have a good strategy moving forward. So culture eats awareness and training for breakfast, and it's highly important that we move the needle when it comes to cybersecurity to provide resilience for our systems.
And Monica, you and I have discussed this before, where cybersecurity, it's only as strong as the weakest link within the supply chain.
Yeah, absolutely true. So a company can have fabulous cybersecurity practices, but they might be outsourcing their payment system to a provider, or their billing system, or their claims, or their customer information. And your cybersecurity is only as good as that supplier's cybersecurity. And we're increasingly seeing threat actors targeting not the main company, but those smaller companies that are handling the data transfers.
Yeah, and Gaurav, what's interesting is when we think about it specific to the retail sector, it's actually product returns and the reverse logistics that provide vulnerabilities.
Oh, absolutely. And the amount of returns last year, we crossed $1 trillion worth of returns globally. And the amount of information that you put in when you're starting a return, first name, last name, email address, why did you return something, right? That data is available to so many parties, to your point, across the return supply chain. So yeah, it's huge to the number of people that are involved that have access to your data.
Yeah, especially when you think about, okay, you're ordering from this company, then it gets shipped, then it's last mile.
That's
right. So there's more in layers in between than perhaps there might have been, at the infancy of online.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you just look at just consumer behavior in general, right? From being able to buy stuff in stores for the most part, now people are buying more and more online. So you're putting in a lot more information versus going to a store where you just maybe did it for cash, right? So I have your first name, your last name, your address. Now you're returning. Return rates, apparel and fashion, you're looking at about 30%, electronics 15 to 20%, right? So the volume of transactions that are happening globally are also skyrocketed over the last several years. And when you're sending the returns back, there are multiple providers in the middle of that supply chain, first mile, middle mile, last mile, where information is bouncing off between so many different providers.
Yeah, and AI is almost like a blessing and a curse when it comes to this, because these emerging technologies, they just add more complexity to the cybersecurity picture, and your attack surface just continues to expand and expand.
Yeah, and it's absolutely crucial for companies really to map where all of their data is going. If they don't know where the data is being transferred, every single point that they don't know, that's a potential weak link, that's a potential target for threat actors. And what we have seen is that a lot of these smaller companies handling the data don't even have good basic cybersecurity hygiene. There's no multi-factor authentication. Things like that are very basic, but that's where the threat actors are going, because they know it's an easy way in, and they can bring down large companies just by going in that back door.
Yeah. Well, part of the challenge too, Marco, is operating in silos. That's something that needs to come down.
Yeah, especially with complex systems and definitely around operational technology, you're going to have a lot of different hands involved in this, from information technology, their own security groups, their administrative server computation of it, those that are in charge of it, but also the automation engineers, the instrumentation techs that are everything that we're dealing with these days is technology, smart configurable devices. And these silos, what opens up in my eyes is there's so many different direct links into these systems that people are unaware of. Their actions could actually have impacts that are, as Monica was saying, could have major impacts to their own operations and systems.
Yeah.
So key fundamentals there is silos, is trying to break those silos and try to get that governance mindset in, but it really does, it fundamentally focuses around culture.
But what about this rush internally and externally in a very competitive landscape to get these new AI products out there, right? Do you think that was there enough time to model out the risk or evaluate, or are we seeing those gaps and vulnerabilities now?
We're seeing the gaps and the vulnerabilities now, and there's a lot of black box perspective coming into these systems. We're not even sure what is actually leaking out of these AI components that could have those exact attack vectors in. And that's a big critical piece. Even the head of MIT, the Research Development Lab, Dr. Daniela Russ, has said on Nova, and you can look this up, is that they're not even really sure how AI even gets to its output state. So we have to do, as individuals, company owners, and even investors, we have to do our due diligence on who is actually using this technology ethically, but are really kicking the tires on these things to make sure that they're not out bleeding information and have read-write capability into their own systems.
What about smaller enterprises that don't have these types of resources?
Well, and that's one of the challenges. A lot of these companies don't have it, again, for even basic cybersecurity hygiene. And so there really is a responsibility. If you are a larger company and you want good cybersecurity, you need to be working with your partners. And because at the end of the day, it's also your company on the line, and we have seen significant cost. The CDK Global, which was the dealer management system in the automotive space, when they were hacked, it actually impacted the major US automakers in Q2 of 24. So there are significant costs to not knowing where the data is going and how your providers are handling it.
Yeah, I also think, speaking of cost, Gaurav, everyone's going to ask about the return on investment. That's going to be the first question that comes to mind when you're allocating resources to cybersecurity, because it's not a revenue producer, it is a reputation protector.
Yeah, I mean, so first of all the brands want the data. The more data they have, the better they can be. They can sell you more things, they have more information about you, they can prescribe what's coming to you, right? So getting data, the more data they get, the better it is, right? Then if you look at, especially the returns area, you're tacking on more data that's going back and forth between the brands. The larger brands have the ability to at least put in some measures in place, but they have so many players in the middle now, right? If you look at normal shopping, it's not single channel, it's multi-channel shopping and multi-channel returns. You're buying on Amazon, buying on Zalando, buying on different sites. If you look at some of the smaller brands, especially if you look at buying something on TikTok or Instagram, which is where you are, you wonder why something just popped up in 30 seconds that you barely eyeballed, right? So that's all data that's feeding all of that. What's happening with some of those smaller brands is they're getting manufacturers that you're just selling it off their label, right? So that data is going between so many different people in that chain that being able to put in a proper policy, a cybersecurity policy in place is very hard to do.
Yeah, and the thing is with data, it's the commodity these days. Just because Instagram or Facebook or whatever social media platform is free, it's not free. There is a cost to it, and that's the trade-off there. In the same token, understanding that legalese and the opt-in, the opt-out, and so forth, it's going to be hard for the industry to lobby for that anyway, for more privacy protection.
Exactly, and from a cost perspective, right? If you look at from a brand perspective, the first cost is getting the product to you. That's the sale. But with anywhere from 15 to 30% return rate, that product's coming back. The minute a return happens, it's already a loss to the business, right? You're paying for the shipping, paying for the stocking, getting it back to stock. Then you add in more layers saying, hey, I need to put in extra data privacy, all of that. It's a cost, right? So the question is, where do you focus on? And I think most of the time they'll go on, let me get the product to you first, which is where they want to do most of the investments in.
Yeah, and that's, I also think, what makes part of the governance, the part of the equation with governance really challenging as well, because there's just so much of it out there. And even if you're not doing it for malintent, perhaps you're testing out a new generative AI platform and something that was confidential inadvertently got on there. I mean, so you're talking about, minimization, being able to retract that, that information, or just understanding how it's being organized.
Absolutely true. There's a real opportunity, I think, here for standards and some just standard setting, making it easier for companies to know what good looks like. Some companies are very good at it, but it's a lot to ask, particularly with all these middlemen. So are there opportunities to set more industry standards to make it easier for companies to know how to implement good and just to push this out further?
Yeah, I was going to say, especially from the standards perspective, the International Society of Automation is a standards build body. And so one of the key aspects that we have seen is actually partitioning out our critical manufacturing here in the US and across the globe using standards that ISA has built out, that has been adopted globally, to be able to not only partition them in zones and conduits and understanding that aspect of what you have, identifying your inventory of these critical machines, because Gaurav, if you look at it, you place an order online, that's going to digitally go down to a manufacturing site somewhere so we can actually feed forward on how many to build of those widgets or whatever it may be.
Exactly.
So by having zones, conduits, and standards that you can abide by and have a governance strategy over is going to be, it's key and monumental. But the key portion that we all have to do is risk assess each one of those zones, conduits, and those factory plants. And we're seeing a lot of returns on investment from KPIs using AI, using those data lakes that we've created for the last 10, 20 years, using cloud, getting the analytics in to be able to push optimization at the plant level. And we are seeing revenue being pulled in by using standards-based. And yes, cyber is a portion of that. So doing it securely, using technology, but also risk assessing that technology, that's what's going to get you ahead in the long game.
And that's why I was asking the question before, if there was too much of a rush to get these products out with I mean, risk, at least you're able to model that, but I would say uncertainty was part of that as well. There is no way to model that out until you have more time to work with these technologies.
Well, so Jill, if you look at the last 3 decades of digitization, especially in the operations side, we've really moved the needle, and we are the type of folk from a sociology perspective where we accept new technology, new shining light, we got to have it, build it out, spend a lot of money, CapEx on it to do it, nothing bad happens, we accept it, then standards trail. Typically, and it's usually 5 to 7 years after you adopt the technology. There's still currently no true regulatory or ethics that have been done on AI as of yet. There's been a lot of documents, a lot of guidance models. The government has actually done some discussions around it, but no regulatory teeth on it or chops to say you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So there's that normalization of deviance is something that we're going to deal with as humans for the rest of our time.
Well, and part of the challenges too is that it's sector-based. There's never going to be an umbrella that covers all industry. For example, healthcare and financial services regulations, they're kind of the same, but not.
Absolutely, and so industries need to step up, standard setting bodies need to step up. There is a space for the government here as well, but that tends to lag behind, and so there's really a need for industries to come together as appropriate and start to look at that, and it really creates a competitive advantage, I think, when there is a standard for companies. They don't have to be creating this all by themselves. There's something that they can put in place. It makes it easier to govern, easier to push out to suppliers.
And just to add to that, there's some pockets, right? If you look at medical, you've got the HIPAA laws, so there's some of that. If you look at European countries, they have GDPR in place, which is make sure that your consumer data can be anonymized. So when we're looking at a lot of our brands, depending on what sector they are, they're looking at templates for that. But doesn't mean they're necessarily implementing that, right? So if you look at things like, hey, when I'm returning something, can I anonymize my data? In Europe, it's front and center saying, can you do that? And we have the technology in place to anonymize everything. So I don't know who you are, I don't know your history. But that's not put in a regulatory manner today.
Right, but also for the consumer to understand that.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, we talk about this, we've academically have studied this, anonymizing data or minimizing data as a consumer. What's the difference? Or, to retract your data like you can in the right to be forgotten, right?
Exactly.
In Europe. And again, there's such a fundamental culture difference in terms of how the EU looks at privacy versus the US. And we alluded to that before, where it is a basic human right in the EU versus commodity, data is the commodity here. And it's part of every single business model. You're not going to get a lot of businesses lobbying out there to make it easier for consumers. That's just the reality.
That is, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the absence of regulation, are you seeing more companies model off of GDPR or CCPA, just to at least get the most stringent standards in place? Because if you're a global company, you're going to have to abide by them.
Exactly, and I mean, certain global companies, because they have to operate in lots of different jurisdictions, they're going to have the systems in place. It's really going to be a company by company decision as to what they want to put in place. If it's required in Europe, not required in the US, will they make it the same? But some companies do.
Yeah.
And from a corporate perspective, if you're a global company, it'd be nice to have some consistency so that you don't have to have a different privacy regime in every different part of the world. But we're a long way away
And then
from
every
that.
state and every,
state, every
local
locality.
jurisdiction.
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of the brands, especially on the return side, right? They want to know your return history. So they want to know why you returned it, when you returned it. Do you have a tendency to return things in good condition? So can we credit you faster, right? When you actually send the product back, was it the real product that you sent back as an example, right? Or what condition it's in? So that allows them to know a lot more about you. So next time you're returning, they can give you a better returns experience. So that's part of the expectation of the brand to learn from that, right? But what they're also saying now is, can you share your return history not with just one brand, but multiple brands? So it's almost like your Uber driver score, right? Are you 5-star rated or not, right? So brands are wanting that data on one end, but that is at a cost of a lot of risk in what can happen with the data getting into wrong places, especially the middlemen in the transaction.
That's, I think, the work that you're doing in ISA. At least there is a model when it comes to ethical engineering and being able to quantify what that looks like, because what I might consider ethical might not be, from your perspective, and being able to audit these practices and have a benchmark to it. The industry and industry groups are going to have to take the lead here.
Yeah, so we have a term in our industry called RAGAGEP, and that's an acronym for Recognized and Generally Accepted Good Engineering Practice, highlighting the engineering practice, making good, common sense, ethical decisions from a professional engineering standpoint. And I think with AI and cybersecurity, when we're building out these systems and allowing them into our infrastructure, we need to make sure that the guardrails, that we have guardians watching the guardrails to make sure that the guardrails are in place. Again, with cybersecurity, we're seeing AI really alleviate a lot of the analytics that has to go into monitoring your systems at a perimeter perspective. Companies are using AI, so are the bad actors. Bad actors are using AI to actually create new malware strains and even using vulnerabilities that you may consider low in your attack vector stack. So again, it's kind of a dog trying to catch its tail. Here we are, we're coming out with a new technology, great. We're just exploring the discussions around quantum. What's that going to do for AI?
But back to your point, we're creating standards. I think that also leads to a competitive advantage.
It does.
If I say, if I'm working with a vendor or a partner that's ISA certified, I'll probably choose to do business with them versus someone who might not have audible standards in place.
Yeah, so that's a key piece. Thanks, Jill, for bringing that up, is that having companies that actually meet the intent or exceed the actual certification piece shows that not only are you doing diligence, but you're actually having folks in your company trained, authorized, and more importantly, enabled. That's the key piece. I'm an instructor for ISA. I've taught thousands of people, including our National Guard, on industrial control system security. And I will tell you that a lot of my students return for the next class in the series. And I ask them, were you able to go out and make a change, make a difference? And some come back and say, absolutely, we're able to secure the perimeter. Some still come back today saying, we're not enabled to do that.
Yeah, I don't think people understand the complexities behind cybersecurity. Every time you peel back the layer, there's something else.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Again, and it goes back to the importance of just knowing who all of your providers are, knowing where all the links are in the chain, and then if you are a larger company, helping to spearhead those standards and helping to push them out within your industry. So help bring the smaller companies along, require them to be part of it, help them engage, help them go to the courses. That's how you start to make a difference within the industries.
All right, I appreciate everyone's insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.